Chapter 1. Introduction. The hidden industry behind pain **** in the hidden corridors of global trade. Beyond the reach of mainstream media headlines and corporate transparency reports exists an industry that profits from agony. It does not sell smartphones or sneakers, but something far more sinister: the instruments of human suffering. This is the covert world of torture, equipment, manufacturing, and distribution, a shadow economy that supplies the tools of abuse to governments, police forces, and private entities across the globe, branded as law enforcement supplies or public safety equipment. These products are marketed with euphemisms that mask their brutal purpose. Restraint chairs designed to immobilize for hours, batons modified to deliver electric shocks, spiked leg cuffs that cause excruciating pain, chemical irritants that can blind and choke. These are not relics of the past or fictional devices from dystopian tales. They are real, regulated commodities, manufactured in modern factories, exported with paperwork, and displayed at international security trade fairs. Despite the narrow universal legal condemnation of torture enshrined in treaties like the United Nations Convention Against Torture confirm its practice in over 100 countries, from secret police stations in authoritarian states to overpopulated prison blocks in democracies, torture remains a tool of control, intimidation, and punishment. But what often goes unasked is, how do these regimes acquire the tools that make such abuses possible? Who designs them, builds them, and profits from their distribution? This book pulls back the curtain on an industry that thrives in the space between legality and morality. It reveals the loopholes in international export controls, the complicity of manufacturers who turn a blind eye, and the weak enforcement mechanisms that allow these tools to be sold under the guise of legitimate policing. It examines the role of middlemen and brokers who navigate the legal gray zones, often routing shipments through multiple countries to obscure their true destination. Most disturbingly, it shows how this trade often enjoys the tacit approval, at least the willful ignorance, of governments that claim to stand against torture. For every public condemnation of human rights abuses, there are often quiet deals struck behind closed doors, with profits prioritized over principles. In the chapters that follow, we will trace the global supply chains of pain from factories in industrial parks to the cells where victims scream in silence. We will expose the companies, governments, and institutions that sustain this trade, and we will hear from the survivors, whistleblowers, and investigators fighting to bring it into the light. This is not just a story about weapons. It is a story about power, secrecy, and the cost of complicity. It is about a hidden industry built on pain and the urgent need to dismantle it. Chapter 2. The manufacturers who builds the tools of torture. Behind every instrument of pain lies a complex web of manufacturing and commerce, a network of factories and corporations scattered across continents, quietly producing devices that, despite their innocuous or bureaucratic labels, often become weapons of suffering. In sprawling industrial zones of China, clusters of factories churn out an array of products openly advertised as crowd control or detention safety equipment. Chinese manufacturers display catalogs brimming with electric shock batons, metal restraint chairs with padded armrests, and heavy-duty leg irons, all marketed as tools to subdue aggressive individuals or ensure compliance during arrests. Some even highlight features designed to maximize discomfort and control, revealing an unsettling acceptance of their potential for abuse. Across the Atlantic, manufacturers in the United States contribute their own share to this troubling supply chain. American companies produce spit hoods, mesh or plastic coverings used to prevent detainees from spitting or biting, as well as riot shields, pepper spray, and various restraint devices. Many of these products have surfaced repeatedly in reports, documenting abuses during protests or inside correctional facilities. The same shields that police wield against demonstrators have been implicated in excessive force incidents, while spit hoods have been criticized for their potential to suffocate or cause psychological trauma. In Brazil, where political unrest and heavy-handed policing intersect, manufacturers produce a range of control devices for police and prison use. The European Union, with its diverse industrial landscape, also hosts firms that manufacture equipment designed for detainment and restraint. Yet despite stringent export controls in theory, many of these goods find their way to governments. With documented human rights violations, a key factor enabling this trade is the careful language manufacturers use to describe their products. Terms like restraint chair or security equipment replace more direct descriptions such as torture device or pain infliction tool. This ambiguity serves as a legal shield, allowing companies to evade accountability while continuing to operate openly in international markets. Moreover, many of these manufacturers deny knowledge or responsibility when their products are discovered in notorious detention centers or torture chambers abroad. Western firms often claim ignorance of end users, asserting that once a product leaves their warehouse, it is outside their control. This plausible deniability is compounded by a labyrinth of middlemen, distributors, and exporters who reroute shipments through multiple countries, obscuring the final destination. Disturbingly, some companies benefit from institutional support. Export licenses are granted by governments that officially denounce torture, yet simultaneously approve shipments of equipment that enable repression. In some cases, subsidies and government contracts bolster manufacturers who supply security forces domestically and abroad. This dual role, profiting from both public safety, rhetoric, and instruments of repression, exemplifies the institutional complicity at play. This chapter exposes the corporate facade that masks an industry profiting from pain, highlighting the need for greater transparency, accountability, and international regulation. Behind the gloss of official catalogs and sales brochures, these manufacturers build the physical means to silence dissent, enforce cruelty, and perpetuate cycles of abuse worldwide. Chapter 3. Trade routes. How torture tools cross borders. The global movement of torture equipment is as labyrinthine and clandestine as the illicit trades in arms and narcotics. Behind the polished veneer of international commerce lies a shadowy network of shipments, intermediaries, and subterfuge that allows devices designed for inflicting pain to traverse continents, evade scrutiny, and land in the hands of regimes known for human rights abuses. Consider a restraint chair manufactured in a factory in Ohio. On paper, it is simply detention furniture, intended for legitimate law enforcement use. Yet, this chair may embark on a convoluted journey, first sold to a reseller in Eastern Europe, repackaged and relabeled, then shipped onward, often by sea or air freight, to a police force in Egypt. Along the way, the original manufacturer loses sight of the chair's final destination, and with that, any legal or moral responsibility. This complex layering of buyers and sellers intentionally obscures the chain of custody, making accountability nearly impossible. Chinese-made stun batons and electric shock devices follow similarly murky routes, listed under broad and often deliberately vague customs descriptions such as security gear, law enforcement supplies, or personal safety equipment. These products slip through border controls in large consignments. From Chinese ports, shipments fan out across Africa, the Middle East, and parts of Asia regions, where demand for crowd control and subduing tools has grown with political unrest and authoritarian crackdowns. Some of these trade routes operate entirely within legal frameworks but remain ethically free. Exporters obtain licenses to sell non-lethal equipment, ignoring or downplaying the documented abuses associated with end users. In other cases, shipments are routed through countries with lax customs oversight or weaker regulatory regimes, effectively laundering the goods' origins and destinations. However, many routes involve outright illegal tactics. Front companies with innocuous names are established in tax havens or transit hubs to mask the true nature of shipments. Fake invoices and misleading documentation declare goods as industrial parts or medical devices. In some cases, customs officials are bribed or otherwise coerced into turning a blind eye. This deliberate obfuscation benefits a cadre of brokers and middlemen, who rake in millions by coordinating complex international transfers while ensuring plausible deniability. For manufacturers and buyers alike, enforcement agencies tasked with stopping these flows face formidable obstacles. Customs officers in many countries lack the specialized training or technical expertise to identify sophisticated torture devices hidden among legitimate cargo. The rapid globalization of supply chains, combined with weak international standards on torture equipment trade, hampers coordinated efforts to interdict shipments. Moreover, the political will to crack down on these trades is often absent or inconsistent, especially when governments themselves are implicated in human rights abuses. This chapter uncovers the shadowy pathways by which tools of torment cross borders, exposing how global trade mechanisms and bureaucratic loopholes enable a flourishing underground market. Understanding these routes is essential for dismantling the networks that perpetuate abuse and for advocating stronger, enforceable controls on the international sale and shipment of torture equipment. Chapter 4. Buyers and Users. Who wants this equipment? The market for torture and coercive equipment is as diverse as it is troubling. The buyers span a spectrum of actors, ranging from repressive regimes to institutions that claim to uphold the law, yet often blur the line between security and abuse. Authoritarian governments. At the forefront are authoritarian states that openly or covertly procure torture devices in large quantities. These regimes often operate with little regard for human rights or international law. They use such equipment systematically to suppress dissent, silence opposition, and instill fear among their populations. Secret detention centers and interrogation facilities are frequently stocked with an array of tools designed for inflicting pain and extracting confessions. In many cases, these governments cloak their operations under the guise of national security or counterterrorism efforts. Intelligence and security agencies. Beyond overt regimes. Intelligence agencies worldwide, often shrouded in secret, acquire these instruments. In black sites or undisclosed detention centers, prisoners are subjected to enhanced interrogation techniques that frequently cross into outright torture. The clandestine nature of these operations makes oversight difficult, enabling the perpetuation of abuses far from public scrutiny or judicial accountability. Democratic nations and law enforcement. Even countries with democratic frameworks and established legal systems are not immune. Police forces, tasked with maintaining public order, have increasingly been equipped with tools that carry a heavy symbolic and practical association with brutality. Tasers, restraint devices, tear gas, and batons, while promoted as alternatives, have often been deployed in ways that escalate violence rather than de-escalate situations. The militarization of police forces in many democracies has blurred the distinction between public safety and oppression, leading to widespread criticism and civil unrest. Private prisons and correctional facilities. The privatization of prisons has introduced a new, profit-driven dynamic into the equation. Private prison companies are among the largest consumers of restraint chairs, solitary confinement cells, and other control mechanisms. Reports from facilities in the United States reveal tragic outcomes where inmates have suffered or even died. Due to prolonged use of restraint devices, the prioritization of cost-cutting and control over inmate welfare creates an environment ripe for abuse. Latin America and regional practices. In parts of Latin America, the deployment of tear gas, rubber bullets, and batons to suppress prison riots or protests is alarmingly common. These interventions frequently result in injuries or fatalities, highlighting a pattern where instruments designed ostensibly for crowd control become tools of punishment and intimidation. The harsh conditions within many prisons compound these effects, transforming control mechanisms into instruments of torture. Beyond control, tools of punishment and intimidation. Crucially, these devices are rarely used solely for maintaining order. Their function often extends into the realms of punishment, psychological intimidation, and torture. The presence of such equipment reinforces a culture of fear and submission, undermining the dignity and rights of those subjected to it. The normalization of their use in law enforcement and detention settings signals a troubling acceptance of violence as a means to an end. Chapter 5. Government complicity, silence. Subsidies and secrecy. Governments around the world occupy a paradoxical and deeply troubling position in the global trade of coercive and torture equipment. Though many proclaim commitments to human rights and international law, behind closed doors their actions frequently tell a different story, one of silence, tacit approval, and active facilitation. Export licenses with minimal oversight. One of the clearest ways governments enable this shadowy economy is through the granting of export licenses. Official processes meant to regulate and scrutinize the sale of sensitive equipment often become little more than formalities. Investigations and leaked documents have revealed that countries like the United Kingdom, France, and Germany routinely approve shipments of stun guns, shackles, and other restraint devices to regimes notorious for systemic human rights abuses. These approvals often occur despite public condemnation of those very governments' repression and torture practices. The dissonance between public policy and actual licensing decisions illustrates a troubling lack of genuine oversight. Foreign aid as a cover for questionable arming. The United States, a self-proclaimed champion of democracy and human rights, has also been implicated in this complex web. Under the guise of foreign aid and international security cooperation, U.S. governments have supplied foreign police forces and paramilitary units with equipment whose primary use often veers into the realm of intimidation and abuse. This aid includes not only non-lethal weaponry like stun guns and tear gas, but also training programs that tacitly endorse aggressive crowd control tactics. Such assistance is frequently justified as necessary for combating terrorism or organized crime, but the consequences on civil liberties and vulnerable populations are frequently overlooked. Government funding and subsidies to manufacturers. The complicity extends beyond mere licensing. In many cases, governments directly fund or subsidize the very companies that manufacture these instruments of control and torture. This can take the form of defense contracts, research and development, grants, tax incentives, or export promotion schemes. The rationale is often couched in terms of national security imperatives or economic interests such as job creation and technological innovation. Yet the human cost of these investments rarely figures into official calculations or public discourse. Instead, governments prioritize geopolitical influence, industrial growth, and strategic alliances over ethical concerns. The culture of secrecy and evasion. Compounding this complicity is a pervasive culture of secrecy. Details about transactions, licensing criteria, and the NDUs of exported equipment are frequently classified or obscured under commercial confidentiality. Parliamentary oversight committees, human rights watchdogs, and investigative journalists face significant barriers when attempting to uncover the full extent of government involvement. This opacity allows abuses to continue unchallenged and shields officials and companies from accountability. Silence in the face of evidence. **** When abuses linked to government exported equipment come to light, official responses tend toward silence, deflection, or minimal action. Investigations into deaths, torture, or systematic abuse involving such equipment are often slow, inconclusive, or absent altogether. Victims and human rights organizations find themselves caught in a frustrating cycle where evidence of wrongdoing is acknowledged, but rarely leads to meaningful policy changes or sanctions. A calculated trade-off. At its core, government complicity in this economy is a calculated trade-off. Security concerns, diplomatic relationships, and economic benefits are weighed heavily against the moral and legal imperative to prevent torture and uphold human dignity. This calculus results in a grim reality where the machinery of oppression is supplied and sustained by the very states that profess to defend freedom and justice. Chapter 6. The Victims. Lives shattered by devices of pain. Behind the cold, bureaucratic trade documents, behind the glossy corporate websites, lie the true human cost. The victims whose lives are irreparably shattered by these instruments of cruelty. Personal testimonies of pain. A political dissident in Myanmar recounts the harrowing experience of being strapped into a restraint chair for hours on end, unable to move or rest, his body racked with pain and his spirit battered by the unrelenting confinement. He describes the slow erosion of his will, the despair that set in as the hours dragged on, each moment punctuated by the cruel indifference of his captors. In Iran, an activist tells a chilling story of electric shocks administered to his method meant not only to inflict unbearable physical agony, but also to humiliate and break him psychologically. The trauma of that assault has followed him long after his release, leaving deep scars both visible and invisible. A protester in Colombia recalls the merciless beatings he endured with steel batons, his hands bound tightly in handcuffs, the bruises and broken bones healed. But the memory of violence during those moments when every strike was meant to silence a voice demanding justice remains vivid and haunting. Widespread and systematic abuse. These stories are not isolated or anecdotal. Reports from NGOs, human rights organizations, and United Nations investigations document thousands of such cases each year, painting a grim picture of widespread and systematic abuse. The devices: restraint chairs, stun guns, batons, shackles, not just tools of control but instruments of deliberate torture. Yet, for many victims, their trauma remains unseen and unacknowledged. Fear of reprisal, social stigma, and the pervasive apathy or complicity of local authorities often silence survivors. Their voices are muffled in the corridors of power and lost amid geopolitical interests. The lingering effects of torture. Torture does not cease when the device is switched off or the prisoner is released. The damage it inflicts extends far beyond the immediate physical wounds. Psychological scars, post-traumatic stress disorder, depression, anxiety haunt survivors for years, sometimes decades. Communities fracture as families struggle to support those whose bodies and minds bear the imprint of violence. Moreover, the use of such devices perpetuates a cycle of fear and submission that undermines social cohesion and democracy itself. The legacy of pain extends across generations, leaving societies wounded and fragmented. Chapter 7. The Role of Technology. Digital tools of modern torture and repression in the 21st century have evolved beyond the merely physical realm. Modern authoritarianism increasingly incorporates sophisticated digital technologies, creating a new frontier of control, surveillance, and psychological torment. AI surveillance and facial recognition. Governments employ artificial surveillance systems that track citizens' every move. Facial recognition cameras monitor public spaces, linking identities to databases designed to flag dissenters or This omnipresent digital gaze eliminates anonymity, chilling free expression and assembly. Predictive policing algorithms analyze vast troves of data to identify potential threats before they manifest, often targeting marginalized groups disproportionately. Once identified, individuals face intensified scrutiny, arbitrary detention, and harassment. Digital tools for psychological torture. Beyond monitoring, digital technologies enable psychological torture on an unprecedented scale. Repressive states deploy spyware capable of infiltrating personal devices, reading messages, listening to calls, and capturing intimate details. This intrusive surveillance fosters paranoia, isolation, and fear. Victims are often blackmailed or coerced based on private information harvested through these tools. Social media accounts are hacked and weaponized to spread misinformation or discredit activists. Compounding their vulnerability, the role of Western tech companies. Many of these digital systems and spyware come from Western technology companies, some of which profit knowingly or unknowingly from sales to repressive regimes. Despite public commitments to ethical standards, the complexity of export controls and lack of transparency allow these tools to slip through regulatory cracks. The terrifying synthesis of digital and physical control. When combined with physical methods of torture and repression, digital technologies form a terrifying apparatus of control. Surveillance identifies victims. Psychological warfare breaks their resolve, and physical torture enforces submission. This integrated system makes resistance perilously difficult and increases the reach of authoritarian power. Chapter 8. Attempts at regulation laws, loopholes, and failures. International law has made clear declarations against torture and the trade of instruments designed for it. Yet these legal frameworks struggle to translate words into effective action. The cornerstone of global efforts is the United Nations Convention Against Torture (UNCAT), which explicitly prohibits torture and obliges signatories to prevent and punish acts of torture. However, the treaty's enforcement mechanisms remain weak and often dependent on the political will of individual states, something frequently lacking. European Union regulations and their gaps. The European Union has taken more concrete steps, enacting regulations that ban the export and trade of equipment explicitly designed for torture or cruel, inhuman, or degrading treatment. Despite these advances, enforcement suffers from significant loopholes. Many exporters exploit vague definitions and classifications, rebranding or mislabeling items to evade scrutiny. For example, stun guns might be categorized as self-defense tools rather than torture devices, or restraint chairs may be marketed as medical or therapeutic equipment. Moreover, the trade networks themselves have adapted, routing through countries with lax regulations or poor enforcement to obscure their final destinations. This transshipment through third-party nations creates a labyrinthine supply chain that regulatory bodies find challenging to trace or control. Challenges from industry and geopolitics. Activists and NGOs have long campaigned for stronger, more transparent regulatory frameworks, but these efforts face staunch opposition. The defense and security industries wield substantial influence through lobbying, emphasizing economic and security rationales that often overshadow human rights concerns. Governments caught between economic interests, geopolitical alliances, and public pressure tend to favor maintaining the status quo. At the same time, rapid technological advances mean that legal frameworks are perpetually one step behind. New products, digital surveillance tools, and hybrid devices emerge faster than laws can be adapted or enforced. Geopolitical considerations, such as strategic partnerships or counterterrorism priorities, further complicate unified global action. Without robust international cooperation and genuine political will, regulation risks becoming symbolic a set of rules on paper without real-world teeth. Chapter 9. Whistleblowers and watchdogs. The fight to expose the face of systemic silence and obfuscation. A courageous few risk everything to shine a light on the dark corners of the torture economy. The courage of whistleblowers. Inside manufacturing firms, customs agencies, law enforcement, and even government bodies, whistleblowers have stepped forward to reveal hidden truths. These individuals provide irrefutable evidence, documents, internal communications, shipment records that expose how torture devices are produced, traded, and deployed. Their disclosures have sparked investigations, media exposes, and legal challenges. However, their bravery comes at a high cost. Many whistleblowers face retaliation, ranging from professional demotion to criminal prosecution. In some cases, they are forced into exile or live under constant threat. Their sacrifices underscore the peril inherent in challenging powerful interests deeply embedded in political and economic systems. The role of NGOs and human rights watchdogs. Non-governmental organizations such as Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch, and specialized watchdog groups compile extensive dossiers documenting abuses linked to torture equipment. These organizations use investigative research, survivor testimonies, and legal analysis to hold states and companies accountable. They publish reports that inform the international community, press for legal reforms, and support victims seeking justice. Yet, NGOs themselves face growing challenges. Governments have sometimes defunded, discredited, or legally harassed these groups, particularly when their work embarrasses powerful allies or domestic interests. Despite these obstacles, their persistence has kept public attention on the issue and pressured some policymakers to act. The importance of vigilance. The combined efforts of whistleblowers and watchdogs form the backbone of accountability. In a sector rife with secrecy, their work transforms scattered fragments of truth into coherent narratives that demand redress and reform. Chapter 10. Conclusion: A call for transparency and justice. The hidden economy of torture equipment represents a profound moral failing within the global market. It thrives on ambiguity, on legal loopholes exploited with impunity, and on the political indifference that arises when profit and power take precedence over human dignity. Transparency as a foundation. Real change begins with transparency. Governments must lift the veil of secrecy surrounding export licenses, NDU certifications, and corporate ownership structures. Civil society and international bodies require unimpeded access to monitor and investigate the trade flows of these instruments of suffering. Accountability for governments and corporations. States can no longer claim ignorance or helplessness. They must enforce existing treaties rigorously, close regulatory gaps, and impose sanctions on violators. Companies involved in manufacturing or distributing torture devices must be held legally accountable for the consequences of their products. Financial institutions facilitating such trade should also face scrutiny. Empowering civil society and survivors. Civil society organizations need sustained support, including protection for whistleblowers and funding for human rights monitoring. Survivors of torture must be recognized not only as victims but as agents of justice, their testimonies forming a vital part of the accountability process. A global call to action. The fight against the trade in torture equipment is far from over. It is a struggle that transcends borders and ideologies, a test of our collective commitment to uphold the principles of human rights and the rule of law. This is not merely a story of commerce, it is a story of complicity, silence, and resistance. Until transparency replaces secrecy and accountability replaces impunity, the tools of pain will continue to circulate unchecked, leaving a trail of suffering in their wake.